Teacher's table.
We can't feed all these children that are starving all over the world. And so if you do care about child hunger, you may not care of the animals, but if you do care about child hunger, if you do care about climate change, you want to be thinking about what you're putting in your mouth 3 times a day and whether you can make a difference. Nobody's too small, in my opinion.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Ticho's Table podcast, a podcast for anyone interested in veganism or plant-based food, whether you're vegan or not. What a deal! I'm Jonathan, Ticho's emotional support animal. On the show today, I'll be interviewing the delightful Dr. Nitu Bajekal, whose soul is surely dipped in treacle. I'll ask her how to sort the wheat from the chaff when it comes to nutritional advice, all about lifestyle medicine, whole food plant-based eating, and so much more. But first, Val and I take on the big one.
Jon and Val. Vegan Wines with Jon and Val.
Cheers. Doesn't sound elegant, does it? Oh my god, she's totally covered in wine. And this one's got a fly in it.
Oh no! What a mess.
Elegance squared. That's a good thing it's rosé. So I'm back again with Val Gallardo, my pal and level 7 vegan. Today on the show we've got the big one, the question that we knew was coming at some point. Vegans in relationships with non-vegan people. That's the topic today. First things first, we're going to open the wine of the day, which again is La Posada. It's from La Posada Winery in Argentina, but this time it's the Syrah Rosé. Also organic like last time. Last time it was the Malbec. This time it's the Syrah Rosé. Get your nose in there. See what you think. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's lemony. It has that kind of astringency, I think is the word they use.
I knew I shouldn't have brushed my teeth before I came here.
Dear, oh dear. We've chilled it, of course, as it's a rosé. We're drinking it just in time now in early autumn because it's more of a summer.
It's more of a summer drink. I rarely drink it.
Me neither, actually, but they can be very nice.
But this is nice.
Yeah, with a light meal or barbecue. Too late for that, but yeah, it's refreshing. Sent to us again from Oxfam Fair Trade.
Thank you, Oxfam Fair Trade.
Very kindly. Why do they send it to us? Good question. They just want you to know that they have a range of vegan wines. Most of their wines, I think, are vegan. On their website, you can look up whether it's vegan or not, but most of them are. Now, on the bottle, you do have the label for organic and fair trade. But yeah, this one's vegan as well. Still, we've got the big one today, and we might even get variations on this question in the future, but...
We had some interesting comments online as well.
We did. We'll get to those after the interview.
Okay, here goes.
This is from Bothered in Belgium.
Bothered in Belgium says, Dear Jon and Val, I dream of having a fridge full of vegan food, but my boyfriend still eats meat at home, right in front of me. It's really disgusting to me. And every time I open the fridge, I see death.
It's quite dramatic.
Yes. I've tried to get him to at least eat vegan at home, but he says I'm being controlling. Am I? Or is it a reasonable request? And how can I make him understand my perspective as a vegan? I'm worried our relationship won't survive if we can't get past this. You might just say, just find another boyfriend, but we've been through a lot together, and I really do love him. That's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, just get another boyfriend. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding, because I think this is actually a very common situation. And I was just reading a statistic, something like half of vegans in a relationship went vegan because of their partner. Yeah. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. So that gives you hope in a way, if you're a vegan stuck with a meat eater.
Yeah, I think people influence each other, and like with time, probably this person will be less likely to eat meat. Or like
Bothered in Belgium is getting impatient.
Oh yeah.
They want practical advice today.
Like a emergency solution would be like to get a separate pantry or like a separate fridge. Indeed, it's a big problem because I assume they eat together.
From the tone of voice here, you see death in the fridge. You sound a bit distraught. You sound a bit dramatic. I mean, I agree, it is death. But I wonder, do you talk to him in the same tone? Because then you could be creating a sort of a sense of guilt or shame. And even if you believe eating meat and animal products is a shameful thing, I think we all understand that that might not be the most productive way to start a conversation with someone by shaming them.
Yeah, we don't know their relationship history either. Like,
We don't.
this controlling thing, it could be about food, it could be about other things, I don't know. So it's kind of tricky without like having more information. Also, like, I think there's nothing you can do really. Sorry to disappoint.
Well, I mean, there must be an approach. I mean, nothing you can do to solve it instantly.
Well, nothing you can do to like change this person's mind. I think in general, you cannot change people's minds. I mean, you can be an influence, like people can want to become vegan because they see that you're having a good thing going on, but you cannot like make them change, I think.
No, certainly not. Well, whatever you've been doing, it hasn't worked so far. That's clear. And maybe it's not about you bothered in Belgium. Maybe it's just that your partner is not ready to do that yet. Maybe just try discussing the situation with them in an open way, not in a sort of, I want you to be vegan, how are we going to achieve it way, but more in the sense of asking questions like, what is challenging to you about it?
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Maybe your partner is also thinking about the impact it will have on their family life, but they're too shy to admit it. Who knows what are the many reasons they're grappling with. So yeah, if you're getting this frustrated, I imagine the other person is, equally frustrated, and maybe even more,
Yeah.
So don't force it, is my general advice.
I mean, just for yourself, like, because you're disgusted at the sight of meat, maybe the best solution is eating separately for a while, at least to alleviate, like, your frustration. But indeed, I agree, like, asking questions like, what is stopping you from eating the same food I eat? Why don't you want to eat it? It's also unclear if, like, they refuse to eat anything that's vegan or if they just don't want to give up the meat. I think it's the latter, right? Like
in that case, it could be a belief that meat is essential for health.
Yeah, a lot of
something
people
like
think that. But if that's the only thing, there's a lot of stuff you can read online about healthy vegan diet, I think. One of our favorites is Dr. Greger's nutritionfacts.org.
Good old Dr. Greger, nutritionfacts.org,
yeah. He's got hundreds of studies on veganism and like how food affects you or your bodies.
Yeah, and Dr. Nitu, who I'll be interviewing shortly, has some other resources that she recommends, so I'll put all that in the description for the podcast. I think another aspect of this, a potential aspect, because as you say, we don't know everything about the situation, we don't know much about it. Another aspect is the power dynamics of this couple. We sometimes don't want to give up territory. We don't want to give up ground to a partner. If the relationship is tense, we feel like we're constantly going back and forth or trying to assert our value. Mm-hmm. Every little gesture seems to have subtext to it. Maybe your partner is thinking, oh, if I relent and go vegan, does that mean that you win? Is that another victory for you?
I hope that's not their dynamic.
I hope not. I'm just thinking out loud here. You get that in families as well, where there's a definite kind of hierarchical structure. Yeah. People are not negotiating in terms of logic predominantly. They're sort of negotiating the power structures that are already in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Food can be really tied to identity as well. Like, culturally, like what you grew up eating and like what the food that your family made was. Maybe it's like a meat-heavy diet. Especially some men imagine that it's like giving them strength or whatever. I think my advice would definitely be get to the cause of what's going on. Like, ask questions that don't blame or judge, but just like, what is stopping you from eating this food that I made or this food that I want to eat? Try to understand each other better.
Yeah, I think you're right. and I'm no doctor, but my diagnosis is that Bothered in Belgium is jumping the gun a little bit. Just step back, because you may be freaking your partner out a bit. I might be thinking, what kind of militant vegan have I gotten in bed with, literally and figuratively? So rein it in a little bit, because it's not working what you're doing. Just be patient and loving.
And care for yourself as well. Like, if it's really making you miserable, eat separately.
That's quite
I don't know. Yeah.
a statement in itself, isn't it, to eat separately?
It is, yeah.
Next thing they'll be sleeping separately.
Do you ever have a similar situation?
I gotta say no. This is probably why I'm trying to help from a different perspective of, like, maybe it's power dynamics, maybe it's, maybe it's just because the person is too intense.
Mm-hmm. I've dated meat eaters before. When I was
While you were
vegetarian.
vegan?
No, vegetarian, but in any case, like, they ended up vegetarian or vegan. So I think that's why I say you influence each other. I mean, it's not that I was campaigning or anything. It's just by sharing meals and, like, cooking together.
I was just reading about this phenomenon called the knowledge gap. I think it's a media studies thing, because Christopher Sebastian from VGN News was doing a sort of analysis, and they said, the knowledge gap is basically how clickbait works. You see something and that gives you the impression that there's something you don't know, and that makes you uncomfortable. That's the sort of cognitive dissonance. So you could kind of clickbait your partner effectively by not trying, just by doing your thing and being knowledgeable about what you're doing. They will realize that there's something going on with you that you really love and that you're getting a lot out of, and they're naturally going to be intrigued by that.
I was afraid when you said clickbait your partner. I was like, that sounds really bad.
Well, it's nothing sexual, Val, if that's what you're
No. I thought it was like a scheme to manipulate them.
Oh, no, not like some sort of online dating.
10 things you shouldn't do in the kitchen.
No, nothing like that. No, I'm just using a bad analogy with this. But yeah, basically just what I said before. Yeah. Don't be too intense.
No, care for yourself. Live and let live.
I think
that's stupid because he's eating meat.
Yeah, that's right.
But
I think we should leave it there because, number one, we're not qualified to take this any further. We don't have any direct experience with that.
No.
Number two, we got a lot of responses to this.
Yeah, we should read those.
We're going to read those out afterwards. Yeah. That's going to take longer than usual. So let's draw the line there for now. Hopefully what we said gives you something to think about. Maybe it's helpful, but
I think
I'm sure among all the people who commented, there'll be some wise words that will help you just as much, perhaps a lot more.
Teacher's Table.
Today I have the privilege to talk to a remarkable person whom I admire very much, a consultant gynecologist and women's health specialist with over 35 years' experience providing medical and holistic care to patients. She was also one of the first US board-certified lifestyle medicine physicians in the UK. She's written the Women's Health module for the first plant-based nutrition course at a UK university, and she regularly posts great information about women's health and plant-based eating on her Instagram page. If I were to list her many qualifications, memberships, and areas of expertise, we'd be here all day. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Dr. Nitu Bajekal.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. It's such a privilege. I love to see young people promoting plant-based eating because we are in a crisis right now with our health, with the planet, and I think this can't be more timely.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. And first, I'd like to talk a little bit about the person behind the resume. You were born in Karnataka, is that right? South India, near Kerala.
Yes. But actually, my mother just went there for her delivery. Although I'm a South Indian, I grew up in Bengal, in Calcutta. And after my schooling there, I went to medical school in Pondicherry, which is, again, back in the South, a little French sleepy colony, but a beautiful, very state-of-the-art medical school where I met my husband. And we then went on to do our post-graduation, myself in obstetrics and gynecology in Delhi. So I basically went all over India, but by the age of 29, we had done all the exams and we'd had our first daughter. And we felt there was more to life than just settling down to a academic consultant job. We wanted to see the world. And we had heard that if you went to the States, you never came back. So we came to the UK thinking we were going to go back in 4 years. And we are here 30 years later. I was born a vegetarian.
You grew up vegetarian. Is it correct that South India as a region is largely vegetarian for religious reasons?
I would say actually that's not true, because about 80% of India really does eat animal products. It's just that it's very expensive, as it should be. And so it is eaten rarely. The problem with any voice that is heard, the voice that was heard were from the upper caste, of which I unfortunately or fortunately belong, which meant that for religious reasons, you have the Brahmins not eating meat generally. There are some, of course, modern times is different. And so the general idea is that most Indians are vegetarian. They are mostly vegetarian in the sense they can't afford to necessarily eat meat and eggs and fish and things. But that is sadly changing with cheap meat available and cheap dairy. So I was vegetarian because of ethical reasons. Although we were by religion meant to be vegetarian, my mother was an ethical vegetarian.
Your parents were quite progressive for the time.
Very
right?
progressive.
They were both atheists or agnostic?
Yes. My mother was actually an atheist, and she used to get very upset when I used to occasionally, I must have tasted, I think, goat a couple of times in my life and chicken a few times. And she used to always wonder why I did that. In India, often they have the butcher shops quite open and you can see what's happening. And I didn't put two and two together. And she used to say, don't you see what's happening? And I do regret not listening to her. But, children tend to rebel. And I did occasionally eat animal products. Dairy was not a big feature because it was expensive. And both my parents were academic and we didn't have a lot of money. But we did eat dairy, at home, but very small amounts and very small amounts of oil, because again, that was a very expensive commodity in those days. My mother had a very busy job. She was a teacher. She held down about 4 jobs, but she used to be a fantastic cook. And I used to love her food, but I used to complain that, we didn't eat like our friends did, my classmates did. And she said, well, you run the fastest and you're the tallest in the class. I don't know what you're complaining about. So they knew obviously what plant-based eating meant, for health. And they remained healthy until they passed in 2016. In fact, my father had never had a problem with anything at all. His blood pressure and blood sugars and all were always normal, considering how common diabetes is in men, especially.
Your father was an educated man as well. He renamed you.
Yes, he did.
Nivedita, after the Irish-born social activist.
Yes. So he was a very progressive man. I actually am one of 3. I'm the youngest, and we all became doctors. But there were no rules that were different for us girls compared to my brother. Everybody did the same thing, which was very progressive. And it was only when I went to medical school that I realized, that there was a difference between being a female and a male. And actually, when I met my husband, he was my boyfriend then at 18, my father gave me only one piece of advice, saying, please do not get married before you become a doctor. And to say that 40 years ago was really because he felt that, it might just be that I won't complete my education. I won't be able to stand on my 2 feet because, at the end of the day, people do have issues in relationships and things. And he was very far thinking about that. And I'm really very grateful for him and my mother but they did come from educated backgrounds. So it's not surprising that they were forward thinking because they had already had that privilege, of being, privilege begets privilege, doesn't it?
Yes,
Yes.
So you were effectively molded to have a progressive approach to medicine in your future and also to social justice. You're a feminist.
Yes. Absolutely. And I met somebody who was equally on that path. We didn't, however, equate necessarily animal justice enough But my brother turned vegan when he went to do his PhD in the US, and he had to experiment on chimpanzees and other animals, and he became vegan pretty much overnight. But when he came to visit us in 92, I had also watched a couple of things. I'd seen some sheep shearing and I went vegetarian. But it took my daughter, my younger daughter, who's now 28, she must have been about 9 or 10, to say that she was going to go vegan, which made me then go from being vegetarian to veganism.
It wasn't through your medical training that you found that a plant-based diet was optimal for health. It was through your daughter.
Jonathan, the truth is, I don't think we were taught even a single hour of nutrition. We were taught what a calorie was and how many calories were there in, per gram of carbohydrate, protein, and fat. But that was about it. Literally did not know that food could be preventive medicine. In fact, it was cool to snigger and laugh at preventive medicine. But, human beings are here because of a couple of things, because of the discovery of penicillin and hand washing, and clean water. Not because of chemotherapy or, life-saving surgery, but it was cool to become a surgeon, which is what I did. And as I progressed, I realized that I was making a difference to all these people and yes, changing their lives. I was in obstetrics and gynecology and it was very exciting. But the truth was I was seeing women after the illness had started. And I myself, as an obstetrician and gynecologist, did not realize what help is available out there and that there was no help. Because at 38, so just before my daughter turned vegan, my younger daughter turned vegan, I became prematurely menopausal, which means the average age of menopause, which means when you stop your periods, is about the age of 51 all over the world. So that's constant. And that means no periods for a whole year. And then you label somebody as they are in the menopause, and that's where they stay and have hot flushes and all kinds of symptoms, depending upon which part of the world you come from and how acceptable it is to talk about it and your diet and other things. But to become menopausal at 38 happens to under 1 in 100 women. And I was unfortunately one of those women who stopped their period. But I was very fortunate that I'd had my family by then.
Yeah.
So I was really suffering with panic attacks and hot flushes, but I didn't know what was happening. I put it down to stress. Doctors are terrible patients. I didn't have the time, so I was just going to become a consultant. I was really struggling when my daughter came home and dropped another bombshell on me saying that she was going to go vegan and, she loved her sausages. So I didn't understand what it actually meant and said, why can't you just be vegetarian? And she said, oh, don't you understand that white equals red? The milk that you're drinking, Mom, that cow has to go to the slaughterhouse. So I was taken aback because I knew that you could be very unhealthy eating a vegan diet by just having white bread and crisps and Oreos. And I didn't know any other vegans, and my brother was far away. So I had to really relearn everything. And I was really surprised. In about 3 months, I noticed I was feeling very much more energetic. And I always thought I had a good diet. I was always slim, never really, I was always active. I didn't really think that I could be any healthier until I changed my diet. And in those days, 20 years ago, really 18 years ago, you didn't have junk vegan food that much. You knew about some accidentally vegan foods, but you didn't really have that much of junk food. Right. So I essentially always cooked at home and used to get really frustrated because I didn't know any vegans. I didn't know what plant-based eating was. And over the years, I started then realizing, why do I feel younger and healthier and more energetic? And I started looking into it.
So it was this change to a plant-based diet that got you interested in lifestyle medicine as an approach.
Because I thought, if this is helping me so much, surely there must be something. So then started researching quite a lot.
Maybe you could explain what the term lifestyle medicine means and how it relates to conventional medicine.
Yes. So lifestyle medicine is the use of evidence-based approaches to prevent, manage, and even reverse chronic illnesses. 80% of what I see, what my husband as an orthopedic surgeon sees, what a GP sees in their surgery is related to a chronic lifestyle disease, such as heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, Alzheimer's, and lots of women's health conditions. So what happens is we try and treat these lifestyle diseases with medications. And of course, there's a place for medication. But if we can even prevent these conditions, because these are among the top 10 killers all over the world. Okay, so this is not just US or UK or Belgium. It is among the top 10 killers in the entire world. And what we are doing is we're throwing tablets at it. We are throwing surgery at this. And so lifestyle medicine is not alternative medicine. It has to be scientifically proven. It has to be evidence-based. And what lifestyle medicine is about is following 6 pillars. The 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine tends to be or is eating a predominantly whole food plant-based diet. By that, I mean that the vast majority of your diet or the way of eating should include an abundance of fruits, different fruits, lots of vegetables, focus on green leafy vegetables, lots of intact whole grains, which means that the less processed the whole grain is, the better it is. So there's a hierarchy of grains, which means that your black rice or red rice or wild rice is better than brown rice, which is better than white rice. You understand? So, white bread can worsen your diabetes, while if you have rye bread and sourdough bread, that's better. So the less processed, the more fiber something has, it's better. So fruits, vegetables, intact whole grains, lots of beans and lentils. We know that the longest living societies tend to eat a lot of beans and pulses. The next thing is nuts and seeds. So you have a handful of nuts and seeds, which gives you all your good fats as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And herbs and spices I like to include because they're very good for immunity and for reducing inflammation. So a whole food plant-based diet is an anti-inflammatory diet, and chronic lifestyle diseases are inflammatory in nature. So that means that cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, any medical condition you can think of, they have inflammation as their building blocks.
Yeah.
So if you can actually reduce that inflammation by flooding your body with anti-inflammatory foods, living in areas where, if you can, where there's not much pollution. So all these things. So the first thing in lifestyle medicine is eating a predominantly whole food plant-based diet, which are all those things that I mentioned. The second thing is regular exercise. By that, I don't mean going to the gym. What I mean is moving naturally. So going for walks, working in the garden, working in the kitchen, cleaning your house, doing your shopping. Yes, great if you have a desk job, if you can have a standing desk, or if you are able to go to the gym, that's fantastic. So exercise is the second pillar. The third pillar is making sure that you get good quality sleep. So a doctor like me in obstetrics and gynecology has always had disturbed sleep. So when you have disturbed sleep, your cortisol levels, your melatonin levels, all these things will fluctuate. And as a result, we know that people who have poor sleep tend to have more lifestyle diseases, and they also tend to have poor weight control and things. So good quality sleep of 7 to 9 hours is really important without screen time and things. So after food, diet, and exercise and sleep, the next thing you want to do is identify stress. All of us have stress. So, good stress and bad stress. So when you have bad stress, when you're in a bad relationship, or if you have stress where at work and things, it's really important to identify these stress triggers and try and make some changes in your life that can address it, because not everybody can get rid of all the stress, right?
This is music to my ears, really, because it's actionable advice that's based on evidence, scientific evidence.
Yes.
It's not a quick fix. I experienced a couple of years ago, I went to a doctor with panic attacks, and he immediately prescribed me antidepressants without asking anything about my lifestyle. It's not that I'm against medical drugs, but he seemed offended when I came back and I said I'd first like to try and eliminate some lifestyle factors. And when I said I'd try exercising more, eating and sleeping better, his response was, exercise for anxiety? Never heard of that,
There are proven studies, actually, Jonathan. There are proven studies that can show how you can manage mental health. And it's not for everything.
No.
You have to understand, that's the beauty about lifestyle medicine, is that it works and walks side by side with conventional medicine.
Yes.
One of my favorite lines is, you can't meditate away a broken leg. So it's really important that if you have a broken leg and you need surgery, you should have it.
Of course,
but meditation is great to help you cope with the pain. Meditation and eating a healthful plant-based diet will help you recover quicker because it's, you're reducing inflammation. If you sleep better, you have less stress. So it's really all interconnected.
Yeah.
And so when we were talking about the different pillars, we talked about diet and exercise and stress and identifying stress triggers and sleep. Then the next thing, which is really important, especially for all ages, is reducing and avoiding risky substances and risky behavior. So risky substances like smoking or hard drugs and alcohol, really, none of these have actually any health benefits. So the truth is that, even drinking small amounts of alcohol can increase our breast cancer risk. And of course, alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen, like cigarette smoking.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So avoiding risky substances, and I try to put in risky behavior as well, because if you're not using, not practicing safe sex, for example, you can be left behind with infections that can really, give you a very poor quality of life with sexually transmitted infections. So really being mindful about this and actually understanding that contraception is here to help us and not work against us, because I know there's a big move against various types of contraception, but it should not really be that case. And then the last pillar after risky substances is, having a positive network. So, doing charity work, having friends and family, really trying to have a positive outlook towards life, however hard it may be, because if we don't do that, that can have a real effect on our mental health. And we then stop doing good. We start becoming negative, and then that manifests in our health. And when we have poor health, it's very difficult to say, oh, I want to save the world. I want to, be nice to my neighbors or do any community work. You understand? So that's lifestyle medicine. And a whole food plant-based diet, when the word plant-based, basically means that, yes, there is some room for people who absolutely cannot give up fish or eggs or meat or chicken or dairy. But be very clear, they are not needed for health. They're not needed for the health of the person. They are not needed for the health of the planet. And they're not needed for animals. We need to reduce animal suffering. So, all the major societies, dietetic societies, all over the world will now tell you that eating a plant-based diet is not just okay, it's actually beneficial for us.
So is meat protein in general, including eggs and dairy, inflammatory?
Yes. I think there are plenty of studies to show that. Now, if you might say, or a patient might tell me, what would happen if I ate, goat on a particular festival, or if I had chicken once a month, or fish once in a few months? Probably nothing would happen. Okay. And it also depends on the rest of the quality of your diet. So if you're having a whole food plant-based diet and you eat this once a month, I suppose nothing's going to happen. But most people don't do that. Most people eat 60% of the diet in the UK, I think, is from processed food. And I think less than 12% comes from fruits and vegetables, of which 6% is processed chips. You understand?
Yeah.
If you look at the average person's diet, it would be muesli with a dairy yogurt, and they think it's being healthy. Then they would have, for lunch, they would often have, a tuna sandwich. And then in the evening, they would have chicken with some vegetables. And yes, it's better than having a highly processed diet, but if you look at that kind of diet, sooner or later it'll catch up with you because it's very high in animal protein. And we don't need that much of protein. Protein is something that dials up cancer. So we don't want high levels of animal protein. What we also don't want is high levels of isolated plant protein, because we don't have the studies yet. So, it's fine if you're a bodybuilder or, an extreme athlete, you may be able to burn all that off. For the average person who's running a 5K or a 10K or doing some gym work, you just need, to have lots of beans and lentils and whole grains and, not worry, because instead of worrying about macronutrients or micronutrients, the key is to eat anywhere between 30 and 40. Well, the study basically showed 30 plant foods in a week, different plant foods. So, having a variety of plant foods is what you need, and eating plenty of beans and lentils and, tubers, complex starchy carbohydrates. They have all the stuff that you need. Fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, avocados. You don't need to go anywhere else and start popping, supplements and fish and things into your mouths. Absolutely not needed.
So doctors are only human at the end of the day. They can maybe have blind spots. The problem as patients is, who are we to question professionals in their field if we're not sure? So if even professionals disagree on some topics, how can we decide as patients whose advice to follow?
That's a fantastic question, Jonathan. And there is a lot of confusion, especially in nutrition, because it feels very personal. There's a lot of emotion around nutrition because it's cultural, it's what you've grown up with, and you're suddenly faced with this dilemma that everything that you've been doing, has it been a lie? But my advice always is, being a doctor and with a scientific bent, I always feel the way to do it is to follow the science. Nothing else. Just follow the science.
Which resources should we look up the science on?
So I would definitely recommend the sites that are scientific in nature. And so I would say certainly Dr. Michael Greger, nutritionfacts.org.
Yeah.
Having met him, I know how dedicated he is to having the science out there. Harvard School of Public Health and Walter Willett is very much into explaining what the science really says. The Canadian Food Guide and Eat Lancet guides, these are all, really done very good work telling us what is helpful and what isn't. And so the Eat Lancet guide brought together 30 scientists from all over the world and basically says that, there's not much point being just healthy and being the only person standing on this planet. You understand? So we have to think about what else is happening. And what is happening around us is not just chronic lifestyle diseases. We are dying. Cancer has now overtaken in Canada and things are the number one killer. Heart disease, and more women die from heart disease than men, actually. And that's not well known. Heart disease is the number one killer in most other countries. So if we know that our health is also suffering because of our diets and lifestyles, and we know that factory farming and clearing of all these rainforests for animal agriculture, which is such a poor way of transferring calories from grains into calories into humans' mouths. We can't feed all these children that are starving all over the world. And so if you do care about child hunger, you may not care of the animals, but if you do care about child hunger, if you do care about climate change, you want to be thinking about what you're putting in your mouth 3 times a day and whether you can make a difference. Nobody's too small, in my opinion. Eat Lancet came out that if we don't actually change the way we eat, we're not going to be able to feed, the billions of people that are occupying this planet. And people often say, oh, let's curb the population. Yes, of course, it's important that, people should not choose to have large families unless, they need to think about that. They need to think about driving and flying less. But the single most important thing that you can do as a human being is to avoid food waste and to try and eat almost exclusively a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
Now, the important thing to understand is that the vast majority of consumerism and the impact or imprint that a human being has on the planet is from the Western world, something like 4 to 7 times that the UK and the US have compared to somebody in India. So, it is really important for people who are privileged enough. Not everybody lives, where they can access these healthful foods. There are people who are living in food deserts. We're not asking them to change. We are saying that make healthful foods, beans and grains and fruits and vegetables easily available. The government needs to stop subsidizing, meats and dairy and instead subsidize fruits and vegetables. Then the farmers who are also suffering will start producing more of this using proper tilling methods rather than no-till methods so that they're not destroying the ecosystem. So Harvard School of Public Health and nutritionfacts.org, the Mayo Clinic also has very useful medical information. The NHS has good information. So I tend to recommend sites that are scientific and follow the science. But you have to also remember that there's a lot of confusion out there, and most doctors are not trained in understanding these nuances. So they tend to read the same strap lines that the public read. And so they come back one day saying butter is good. Or they often will tell patients, when the patient comes genuinely and asking, do you think I should cut down on dairy, or should I eliminate dairy after breast cancer or prostate cancer? And they'll say, just eat a healthy diet. Well, that's not the answer that we should be giving a patient who's actually done some research and has come to you for proper guidance. And that is where I think medical schools are failing, and it really hasn't improved enough. Nothing much has changed, and which is why I'm so passionate about bringing this to the public from the grassroots and taking it to medical students and trainees. I never fail to bring in lifestyle medicine because it applies to every aspect of health. There is no aspect of health or medical discipline that does not benefit from understanding all the aspects of health, especially nutrition. And that is something that is woefully lacking in our training still.
So you think if other doctors were aware of these benefits from their training, then they would be open to it? It's not a controversial concept.
No, it's not. Everybody knows eating fruits and vegetables is good. Everybody agrees getting out the processed foods, the processed meats, the dairy, the oils. These are all not healthful foods. We know that, there's only 5% that people disagree on. So that's why when people go on these fad diets, which are not sustainable for the planet, but also not sustainable for health, it's very difficult. My husband did that, he tried. My patients do it. They do try and eat only like a high fat diet or, a high protein, animal protein diet. It doesn't work because after some time you feel sick, you feel tired, and it works initially because you've swapped out all the garbage that was in your diet. But when you eat a whole food plant-based diet, or a way of eating, I hate the word diet, when you adopt a whole food plant-based way of eating, it is plentiful, it's joyous, there's nothing restrictive. And, occasionally if you want to eat, cheat meats or a vegan treat, that is very different. It's not restrictive, it's not restrictive like people often worry about eating disorders. And, usually people don't have eating disorders. They already have it from before, and then they may adopt a certain type of diet. That's different. But veganism is an ethical philosophy. It is about doing the least harm to animals. And the beauty about veganism is it also ends up being beneficial and, joyful for you, because you get mental peace as well as physical benefits. That's the difference. But veganism is an ethical philosophy, while a whole food plant-based diet is essentially a diet. So you could be somebody who wears leather shoes and eats a plant-based diet for health, and that's fine. It's still a step towards the right direction. Until you get rid of these products from your body, what happens is it's difficult to align your morals with your actions. You understand?
Yeah.
It takes time, and we need to be. And often people in the vegan communities, they can be quite harsh because everybody forgets the time when you weren't vegan.
Yeah.
You see? And so all we need to do is support people along the journey, because if you have a room full of 100 flexitarians who eat meat once in a while, it's still better than having just a couple of vegans who nobody wants to hear. So much as I want everybody to go completely plant-based for health and for the planet and for the animals, I have to be pragmatic because, we are so far down the line of destruction that we need to be doing something quite dramatic and drastic to actually pull this back.
Yes, well, on a related note, we have another segment on the podcast where we discuss listeners' dilemmas relating to veganism or going vegan. And one dilemma I received was beyond my jurisdiction as a podcast host, but perhaps you can chime in with your thoughts as a doctor.
Yeah.
It's quite a complicated situation, but essentially this young woman, let's call her Sue, writes that she would like to adopt a plant-based diet, go vegan, but has two main obstacles. The first being she was diagnosed with multiple ovarian cysts. Her doctor said she would have to be operated upon within 3 months to remove them, but she went for a second opinion from another doctor who performed some blood tests and said she should cut alcohol and soy because these supposedly mess with the hormones of some women. So Sue cut out soy and alcohol from her diet, and the cysts went away on their own, or at least they went down. She said her blood tests were more normal, and there are still ups and downs, but it's not so extreme anymore. She's also against going back to soy, as she fears this would lead to more cysts. The second factor in her story is that she has type 2 diabetes, and she's concerned that carbs are a no-go for her, so that rules out a lot of vegetables and other foods. So Dr. Bajekal, perhaps you could give us your perspective on her concerns.
So let's talk about ovarian cysts. So young women will have ovarian cysts on one or both ovaries every month. That is part of a natural cycle unless you are on the oral contraceptive pill, because ovulation has to happen by forming a cyst, which will then release the egg and then the cyst will disappear. So if I scan women, often I will find ovarian cysts that are benign and they just disappear. They're known as functional cysts. They're just little water-filled cysts. They disappear. When you have somebody with multiple ovarian cysts, it depends upon the size. If they're small cysts, this young lady may be suffering from a condition like polycystic ovarian syndrome. These cysts don't need surgery. They just need dietary and lifestyle modification. And alcohol certainly can increase insulin resistance. And so cutting out alcohol is good. Cutting out soya is actually bad because there are plenty of scientific studies and trials to show that soya is not good just for polycystic ovarian syndrome by normalizing blood sugar levels, but it's also good for type 2 diabetes because it works with weight loss, but also by normalizing all the hormonal parameters. So soy itself has got plant estrogens, which is also present in chickpeas and all lentils and all beans, and is present in flaxseed. So different types of isoflavones and lignans. Now, soya, the plant estrogens are actually very helpful. They don't behave like mammalian estrogen, the estrogen that is produced in our body fat. So when you have women who are overweight or men who are overweight, they're at a higher risk of developing many of the lifestyle cancers. So for women, breast, ovarian, and womb cancers tend to be higher, and for men, prostate cancer. Studies have shown, especially there have been very good studies for prostate cancer, that there's a 26% reduction in prostate cancer when people swap dairy for soy. So unless you're allergic to soy, there are about 20,000 studies done in soya, and the plant estrogens actually block the harmful effects of mammalian estrogen found in meat and dairy and all the animal products. So you actually want to increase soya in this situation. So I'm pretty confident to say that that was not necessarily the right answer, unless this young lady was allergic. If she had others, so most cysts, if I scan women a couple of months later, will disappear. So this is not down to, usually if it's just a simple benign functional cyst, it's not because she's cut out alcohol or soy. So that's the first thing. If it was a cyst that she was born with, or other types of cysts like dermoid cysts and things, diet doesn't change. For that, if it's a reasonable size, she would need surgery. But if she has multiple cysts and if they're tiny, then those are called polycystic ovaries. And for that, we know weight loss of 5 to 10% and eating a complex carbohydrate diet. So avoiding refined carbohydrates. So she's right when she says carbohydrates, but we're talking about refined carbohydrates. So white bread, white rice, cakes, and donuts are not good, just like red meat and chicken and things are not good for lots of female health conditions, including endometriosis. So my advice to this young lady would be that if she doesn't have an allergy to soy, if she is allergic to soy or doesn't want to eat soy, that's fine. She can still have a very healthful plant-based diet without eating soya. It's not a problem. But I would recommend for most people who are listening that children should have one portion of soya in a day at least, and one portion is what is held in one handful. So a small child's handful is much smaller compared to an adult. And an adult should have around 2 to 3 to 4 portions of soya. It's very important to have it in the a context of if you eat large amounts of soy, what happens is that you're going to then not eat large amounts of fruits and vegetables and greens and beans and things like that. So you want to have it in context with a healthful diet, and it should be minimally processed. So isolated soy protein is not something that I would recommend, as I said, unless you're an extreme weightlifter or extreme athlete.
Right.
I would recommend eating, minimally processed soy. So I'm talking about soya milk, soy yogurt, edamame beans, miso, tempeh, tofu, things like that, which are very healthful. And women will actually find a benefit from it. And men will find a benefit. There are no man boobs here, and reproduction is not affected at all. In fact, it has helped. In men, especially men who eat large amounts of animal protein will have more problems with erectile dysfunction and sperm action from studies. We know that. So this young lady has done the right thing by cutting out alcohol, because alcohol is not a health food, but soya is a health food. And I have fantastic fact sheet on my website that people will really benefit from, where I try and do a lot of myth busting, because nothing excites people as much as soy does. And one has to remember that 70% of the soya that is grown and all the rainforests that are being cleared is not for human consumption. Human consumption accounts for only 6% of the soy, which is almost always non-GMO, at least in the UK, and it comes from Asia and things. Most of the rainforests are being cleared for animal feed, and you have large amounts of GMO soya and corn that is being grown to feed cows and chicken and dairy cattle, which is then converted into very poorly inefficient calories for us. So if we and the rest of the soy that is grown for biofuel to transport these animals. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, very well, and thank you for that. I do have a follow-up question. So if Sue wants to look further into lifestyle medicine as an approach, is there an international association of lifestyle doctors where she can look up a doctor near her?
Yes.
Are there any in Belgium? Do you know?
In Belgium, I don't know, but we have a fantastic organization called Plant-Based Health Professionals. Dr. Shirin Kassam is the founder, and we have a list of all plant-based doctors, so cardiologists, gynecologists, orthopedic surgeons, hematologists, nutritionists, dietitians, who can do online consultations if needed,
Okay.
And also you have the American College of Lifestyle Medicine in the US, you have the Indian Society of Lifestyle Medicine in India, you have the Australian College of Lifestyle Medicine, you have the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine here. So there's plenty of information. And my own website, which is www.nitubajekal.com, has about 50 fact sheets on various women's health conditions, as well as on lifestyle medicine. What should I eat? What supplements should I be taking? People often take a lot of supplements and they have a poor diet. You don't need all those supplements. You need very few supplements, because supplements are not a replacement to eating healthily.
So what supplements would you recommend as standard as part of a vegan diet?
So I would recommend vitamin B12, whatever your diet, because 40% of omnivores are also deficient in B12, especially after the age of 50, because the intrinsic factor that is produced in your stomach reduces. And so you may not be absorbing the vitamin B12. A daily dose tends to be better than a weekly dose. So you might want to take a smaller dose of vitamin B12 every day, especially if you have skin breakouts. Some people may notice that, so you may have a spray. So vitamin B12, definitely. For people of color, definitely, I would recommend vitamin D3. And for all people, I would recommend vitamin D3 anywhere between 800 to 2,000 international units, especially with the current COVID situation, because we know that people who are vitamin D deficient it's a hormone, and it may actually be a risk factor for being particularly ill with coronavirus. So vitamin D3 is really important, especially in the winter months for all. But I would say people of darker skin need that. Sunshine, of course, is the best. And before you put your sunscreen on, you need to expose the back of your neck, your arms and your legs for anywhere between 15, 30 to 45 minutes, depending upon the melanin in your skin. And some simple things like when you buy mushrooms are fungi. And so you stick them out in the sun between 10 and 3 o'clock, which is the same sort of duration time, which is the best time when you get the UVB rays. So you expose your mushrooms, but for longer, not for the 15 minutes or 45 minutes. If you can do an hour or 2 or 3 hours, they actually make enough vitamin D to give you your entire daily supply.
Wow, what a great tip.
Yes, and the other important thing to remember is to reduce breast cancer risk. Other than soya, which is really very helpful, just having a tiny, couple of between 2 and 5 button mushrooms is enough to reduce your risk of breast cancer, just like drinking green tea also is, and having flaxseed in your diet, which also provides you with your omega-3s. So vitamin D3, anywhere between 800 to 2,000 international units every day. Vitamin B12, and if you're not wanting to take supplements, do get your levels checked at least twice a year. Because it's really not fun, because when you get vitamin B12 deficiency, you can get irreversible nerve damage, okay? And it can be horrific. And then the algae-derived omega-3. Omega-3 is available in your walnuts, in your chia seeds, in your flaxseed, in your green leafy vegetables, but in very small amounts in green leafy vegetables. So I would recommend, especially for extremes of age, you may want to take 250 to 300 milligrams of algae-derived omega-3 a few times a week, because the fish don't actually make omega-3. It is the algae that they eat that makes the omega-3. So you cut out the fish and cut out the mercury and the heavy metals and go straight for the algae-derived omega-3. Iodine can also be a problem. And so for all, again, omnivore diets, just like omega-3 can be a problem for all diets. So unless you get your levels checked, it's not a bad idea to, especially if you're thinking of getting pregnant, you should have 150 micrograms of iodine in your diet, either as a supplement, or if you're quite good with eating seaweed, then sprinkling some dulce flakes or nori flakes and having seaweed a couple of times a week is good. But often people are not very religious with these things. So, I tend to take a supplement that has all three a few times a week, and I take an algae-derived omega-3. I've only just started recently, I have to say. I need to see the science before I recommend something. So that's what I would recommend. It's all on my website, what I feel science is informing me now. There is some suggestion that taking algae-derived omega-3 in high doses can increase prostate cancer aggression. And whether it's fish oil or plant-based, it doesn't matter. And so people can be a bit hesitant with that. So if you have the money to check out your levels, that's fine. But otherwise, I'd say if you are in extremes of age, children and older people, I think for brain health, more and more suggestion is that it may help. But the jury is still out with omega-3. You may get away. I eat walnuts and flaxseed every day and chia seeds, but I also take a supplement a few times a week.
Well, it's good to have a backup.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk a little bit about your family. It seems to me to be a real power family. Your husband, Rajiv, is also an experienced doctor and orthopedic surgeon, and he's also plant-based.
Yes.
Your daughter, Naina, inspired your veganism and is a successful writer and journalist. Is that right?
Yes, so she's the deputy international editor for Time magazine.
Wow.
and has been very influential in charting our lives. My older daughter is a force to reckon with. She is now, having done theology, she is now a plant-based nutritionist, and she's got an amazing website and an account as well, Rohini, and is very much behind helping me to process my thoughts as well. Because, when you are of a certain age, you may sometimes use language that is not necessarily always correct.
I see. Yeah.
So, when we talk to young people, it's really important to be inclusive. I've always been more forward thinking, but I have to say that my role models are my daughters and my mother. And my husband is a back surgeon. He resisted going plant-based or vegan because he didn't want to stand out. In fact, he's just had his story published by plant-based health professionals today about how he reversed his diabetes. He saw a documentary called Forks Over Knives. So he didn't listen to his wife. But about 3 years ago, he saw a movie or a documentary called Forks Over Knives, which I would highly recommend. And I would recommend The Game Changers, which is more recent. He went plant-based, whole food plant-based overnight. And in 3 months, months, having tried every diet before, and his diabetes got worse, he actually managed to reverse his diabetes in 3 months. And in 3 years...
That's remarkable.
Yes, in 3 years, he has dropped his cholesterol. His diabetes has not come back, but also he's got rid of his skin. He had very bad lichen planus, which is an autoimmune condition. He had big purple plaques on his legs from the time I met him, actually. He thinks from the age of 10, but certainly since the age of 18. And he was asthmatic as well. And those have disappeared, and he has lost about 4 stone, which is about 24, 25 kilos.
That's truly remarkable.
Yes, and so his story, I would urge people to read his story. Either I'll be posting it soon today, and otherwise on Plant-Based Health Professionals, which has got amazing fact sheets, whether you want to have a vegan pregnancy, have vegan children, whether you want to just dabble in plant-based diets, whether you want to read about soy, about anything. So they have a fantastic Instagram account as well as their website, and they do fortnightly webinars. The webinars that they host for professionals is amazing, but actually anybody can join Plant-Based Health Professionals. It's not only for doctors or nutritionists. So
I'll put all the links to the websites you've mentioned in the description.
It is life-changing for a lot of people. I want to tell you a story of one of my patients. She had polycystic ovarian syndrome, had South African, and she didn't have periods for she didn't have periods for very long, and she didn't have any eating disorders. She was diagnosed with PCOS. She was then correctly put on the pill to protect her bones and things like that, and then had to be taken off the pill because she developed a problem, and came to see me. And I asked her whether she would work with me. And you will not believe this. In 3 months, her periods returned, and not just returned, they returned clockwork. She had no weight to lose. She was eating a healthy diet, mostly eggs and fish and dairy. And a year into having eaten like that, she thought, you know what, I will go back to having some animal products, and she missed her periods again. Truly remarkable. And went back to on the straight and narrow, and realized that the foods that she enjoys now are nothing is worth swapping that out, especially with regards to her health.
It seems like remarkable stories follow your family around, but
yeah.
Are these stories outliers, or can someone else with type 2 diabetes expect similar results?
Oh, not outliers at all. Type 2 diabetes is now, there are so many stories, they actually got boring. So, but the truth is, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be 100% cured. I don't like using that word cured, because all my husband has to do is go back to his old ways, and then his diabetes will be back. So I want to just say that you're managing your condition, right? And so whether you manage it 10% or 20% or 100%, it doesn't matter. The more you put into this, and that's the one thing I didn't mention about lifestyle medicine. Lifestyle medicine, the patient is in the driving seat, not the doctor, not the healthcare professional. Okay, while in conventional medicine, the doctor decides for you. I decide whether my patient is going to have an operation. I decide, and rather than making it more inclusive, while lifestyle medicine, the patient decides. I'm going to eat plant-based for 1 meal of the day. The patient decides. I'm going to eat plant-based for 3 meals a day. The patient decides. The patient decides they're going to go plant-based, 7 days of the week.
Right.
No, the doctor is not deciding for you. They are there to just guide you, to say, okay, this is great. With 20% of changing, you have improved this much. You can improve more if you want to do more. And it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You feel so good. Nobody wants to take their tablets and insulin injections and things, right? So what happens is, when you're doing that, you're always thinking about death. You're thinking about complications. Diabetes is one of the biggest reason why people are in hospital, from, blindness. My husband had cataracts, early cataracts, from a kidney disease, dialysis, amputations. So, all the time you're thinking of that when you're having your tablets and injections, and which is why a third or even a half of diabetics don't take their medications regularly. Instead of that, if you find a diet or a way of living where there is no restriction, you're not weighing anything, you're not calorie counting, you're eating potatoes, sweet potatoes, you're eating, fruits, all the things that diabetics are told they can't eat.
Yeah.
You're trying to cut out junk foods and ultra processed foods and fruit juices and oils which don't bring any health because they don't have fiber. The simple one word that I want all your followers to listen to is the word fiber. So basically, the average person eats about 18 or 20 grams of fiber, and it's recommended we eat 39 to 45 grams of fiber. Now, if you're eating a plant-based diet, you hit that easily, a whole food plant-based diet.
So to put that into perspective, how much fiber would be in, say, an apple?
It would be, 2-3 grams, but beans has got the highest fiber. So 8 grams, I think, for a cup. So, if you just don't worry about the fiber even, you just eat, just to give you an idea of what I would eat in the day, I would have a big bowl of steel cut oats that I would either soak overnight and cook on a weekend. And that would often have a lot of sprouted grains, but you don't have to. You can just get steel cut oats. Rolled oats is fine, but obviously the more processed the oats are, the less the fiber it is. You soak it, then I have put a cup of soy milk. So there's a lot of fiber, soluble and insoluble fiber in porridge oats. And I would have that with a tablespoon of flaxseed and chia seed that has been milled. I would have cinnamon in it. I would have a banana. I would have an apple chopped up. I would have blueberries, blackberries, walnuts, a compote in it. So a couple of dates chopped up. That's a lot of fiber. That's a big breakfast. I would often then take a green smoothie to work on the days that I can't have my big breakfast. Again, I throw everything into it: kale, mango, bananas, apples, things like that.
So it doesn't matter if the foods are blended up to very fine particles.
So yes, that's a very good question. Smoothies are very good for people who have very small appetites, who may be battling with cancer, for example, who are old and who don't have big appetites, children, pregnant women. So you would tend to have smoothies because it's difficult to eat large volumes sometimes of green leafy vegetables and things. But the important thing with smoothies that should be that you should sip them. You should not glug them down because you want your mouth, the amylase in the saliva, to break down the fiber and the cells as well. The cells are already broken, but you want them to digest the carbohydrates.
Right.
So you don't want to glug down your smoothie. And it's very different from a fruit juice. So, having smoothie a few times a week is a good way of getting your greens and your other foods in, especially somebody like me who has a busy lifestyle. Sometimes I tend to do time-restricted feeding. So if I'm not going to be at home to have my large bowl of porridge, I will throw a whole lot of porridge, oats and beans into my smoothie, and I'll take a big, can of my smoothie, which I will sip over a couple of hours and then rinse my mouth out because, of course, it's got lemon and ginger and things like that. So you want to rinse it out to protect your enamel. So it really, what I'm trying to say is that you can work it to fit your lifestyle. I tend to have a couple of baked potatoes for lunch when I'm in the hospital with baked beans and steamed vegetables and salads from the canteen. And that's available in most places. Or if I'm at home, I would have, some rye bread with hummus that I've made at home. It just depends on what you have. How much time are you interested in cooking? Do you want to, when you go into the shops, can you buy whole foods? Everybody says, oh, don't have canned foods. But at the end of the day, I'm lazy. I don't want to soak all my beans, Speaking
of your busy lifestyle, you're also working together with your daughter Rohini to raise funds for Made in Hackney.
Yes.
Could you talk about what that is and what you do for them?
So Made in Hackney and Life After Hummus are 2 community kitchen projects that try and feed people and teach people skills. They have diabetes, they have heart disease, they may have cancer, and they run these free classes where all you need is a chopping board and a knife. That's it. Because a lot of people don't have access to blenders and to fancy gadgets, right? So they teach... So often I will do a talk, or my daughter might do a talk, or some other person would do a talk, and or they may have a video from Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine. And so basically, once the group has been shown, given some scientific information, they are then taught to put that into practical knowledge. So they will, and of course, with the current coronavirus situation, we don't have face to face. So I often do Zoom classes. I'm doing one this Thursday where I'm teaching 4 dishes, which are all oil free. So oil doesn't have fiber, so we don't encourage large amounts of oil. Learning how to cook oil free is also very interesting and very tasty.
Yeah, I'm interested in that myself, but I do love cooking with oil because it just makes things taste better usually. When you're used to it, I suppose.
Yes,
But,
when you're used to it. Afterwards, once you're not used to it, it actually tastes horrible.
I
And
see.
what does oil do? It basically roasts your food. You can do the
Yeah.
same thing in the oven by sprinkling water. When you are cooking, what I tend to do is I dry roast my Indian spices. So when I'm teaching, for example, I'll teach 4 dishes this Thursday, which would include a bean curry, a different type of rice, a salad, a raita, a vegetable dish, which you can put into a wrap. So when you roast your Indian spices, I used to watch my mother because oil was expensive. And so she used to roast them until you get the aroma. And then if you're used to still cooking with oil, you can put a few drops at that stage. So my advice is if you use a tablespoon of oil, use half and then go to quarter in a couple of weeks and then go to a few drops. And then you'll find that you don't need to. So once the spices are roasted, you put a splash of really hot water and that behaves like oil. And when you put your onions and ginger and garlic and all that, they release water as well. So they actually cook in that. And you can use applesauce and wine or broth also instead of oil. So you think that you need oil and you'll be so surprised. And what I say is, at the end, what you can do is add a few drops if you want for the smell. When I cook Bengali food, I want some mustard oil smell. If I want South Indian dishes, I might put a couple of drops of coconut oil. Coconut oil, by the way, is one of the most harmful oils because it is almost pure saturated fat, one of the few possible oils that raises your triglycerides. So the only oil that is okay, and the problem is when I say it's okay, is extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is very hard to come by. Most of them are fake.
Right.
So cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, it has got some healthful properties. It's got monosaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. But I always say, again, one of my very favorite sayings, which my daughters will always laugh at me, is to say, eat the olive, but not the olive oil. Eat the grape rather than the grape juice.
That's a good rule of thumb, yeah.
And eat the coconut flesh rather than the coconut oil or the coconut milk. So once you understand that you're eating the whole food, then when you do digress, I'm an ethical vegan as well as a whole food plant-based advocate. But the truth is that if you show me a vegan donut, I will eat it. I will eat the vegan pizza. You will catch me doing that. Because that's how I originally, I never had that all those years ago. But will I do it every single day? No, I won't, because I feel so rotten. I'll be craving all my delicious foods that I eat on a daily basis. So, but I don't like being rigid about anything, except being rigid about being vegan. That's the only thing I'm really, really rigid about. But I would not advocate a junk food vegan diet because that doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do the movement any good. And so it's really important to be aware that you are probably the only person, the only vegan that people are going to meet. And if you are not that role model, they're going to say, that's the reason why I don't want to be the vegan. You understand?
Well, it's starting to seem more feasible now that I might reduce oil. But another thing we like fat for in food is it can impart a sort of creamy texture.
Yes.
So if you had like a tikka masala,
Yeah.
could I make it creamy by adding a sort of cashew cream?
Of course. You don't have to. So if you don't have time, you can get cashew cream, but I tend to just soak the cashews. And then when I'm blitzing, so most of my recipes, if people go on my website, they'll find lots of recipes. Most of my recipes are very quick and easy. But one of the things, I have a wonderful dish, which is a Bengali dish called aloo dum, where you actually make these potatoes in this creamy sauce. Instead of dairy yogurt, you can use plant-based yogurts. You can use cashew nuts if you're not worried about, having a lot of nuts. So nuts are healthy and they can actually help you lose weight. You want to keep them unsalted. You want to have a handful of nuts. And so
So even though they contain oil and
That's
quite
fine.
high calories, they help you lose weight.
Yes, because they satiate you. You understand?
I see,
So,
yes.
so we are asking you to eat a handful. We're not asking you to eat a bucket full of salted nuts, because then you will reach for the alcohol, and it becomes a vicious cycle, isn't it? So unsalted nuts will have fiber, and that's how it works. So you're not eating food that is separated out from the fiber. The fiber is in it, and that's what slows the release of anything into your bloodstream. So, if weight loss is a goal, I wouldn't recommend eating 4 or 5 handfuls. The general advice in a plant-based diet is to stick with 1 handful, and then you crumble the nuts so that you get more mouthfeel. So, I tend to crumble my walnuts into my porridge or into my beetroot and rocket salad. I add lots of flavor like balsamic vinegar and lemon and, just creamy dressings. I have a wonderful dressing which I make with soy yogurt, mustard, some agave syrup, a few drops, I squeeze lemon into it, and it is the most creamy, delicious salad dressing you can imagine. So really, it's not difficult, but you have to be interested
Right.
in cooking. But I don't like anything that takes time. I love cooking, but I want to finish and get out. So,
Well, I do like a creative challenge in the kitchen, so I'm already thinking now how I might...
Yeah, you will enjoy it. And don't be in a rush. Don't suddenly cut out all oil. What I do is, for a couple of weeks, just halve the amount of oil, and then halve it again, and then halve it again, and keep replacing things, and you'll be surprised. The palate is very easily, people who are trying to go whole food plant-based, I say do it for 3 weeks if you're already vegan, and you will not look back. If you are somebody who eats meat and things, then do it gradually over 3 months so that your gut microbiome gets a chance to change. Otherwise, you start feeling bloated and things. So I have lots of tips on how to reduce bloating. I think my daughter has a full blog as well as a post on how to reduce bloating with beans. And that is to do with the fact that your gut bacteria are not used to eating anything that has fiber in it. And so you end up with this feeling and you blame the beans instead of blaming the animal products.
Now, one thing I'm still not entirely clear on in whole food plant-based diet, soy milk, tofu, soy yogurt, do those get a whole pass because they're just healthier?
They get a whole pass only because, so it depends on, so some groups will say that avoid the higher fatty foods like soya, which is, has got all the fiber, the fat, the protein. Some people will say avoid nuts. Some people say go very low fat. That doesn't matter. The bottom line is that these are minimally processed. So how else will you drink your tea if you're not used to drinking your tea black or your coffee black? You want to have a medium. If you want to have a medium for your porridge, you need some plant milk, correct?
Right.
So, yes, edamame beans are whole food, so they get a complete tick, but edamame beans won't have the same texture when you want to have a tofu scramble, or you want to have, tofu fake chicken paneer sauce. You know what I mean? So it really is using different foods which are not really processed. We're talking about minimally processed. We're not talking about ultra processed foods. Okay. So soya meats and soya and cheat meats and things are fine sometimes for children and for older people who need a bit more protein and for the average person as a treat, but they are not necessarily health foods because they may have salt, they may have oil and things like that in them that you don't really want. You want to be eating the food that you recognize with your eyes as much as possible. And tofu you can. If you see the process of tofu, it's not a hugely complex process. Or soya milk. You can make soya milk at home.
Yeah. So if it's minimally processed and part of a diet that's full of fiber already combined, then it's okay.
Absolutely. Tofu has got fiber. And so it's like with anything, you are trying to maximize your nutrition with taste. That's what you're trying to do.
Right. It's not about punishing yourself.
Yes, there is no restriction here. Really, there isn't. It's a little bit different if you have a very major medical condition So when you read Dr. Esselstein's work, he talks about people who are ready to have open heart surgery. So in that situation, yes, you do have to eat your greens 6 times a day.
Right.
You have to eat a lot of beans. You can't really be messing about with, junk vegan foods and nuts and things in high amounts, because you are trying to really cheat death.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to do.
Well, we've reached the end of our time already. It's been really fascinating to talk to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Not at all. I hope your listeners have enjoyed.
Well, if they've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed talking to you, then I highly recommend following Dr. Nitu on Instagram. That's at Dr. Nitu Bajekal. And you can find a lot of great resources and info on her website, nitubajekal.com. I'm also going to post the links that we mentioned in the podcast description. Thanks again, Dr. Nitu. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, Jonathan. It was a pleasure.
Jon and Val. Vegan Wines with Jon and Val.
So, as we said, we got a lot of comments on this question, and that's to be expected, really, because it's quite a common situation, as I understand. First of all, on Facebook, Melanie advocates a Zen approach. She says, "It's not nice to have to be confronted with meat at home, and putting pressure on someone to become vegan often has the reverse effect. They should look for a doable middle way. Cook together a number of times a week to ease him into it. Don't expect him to quit animal products all at once. Leave room for him to make these decisions himself. Even though veganism is a better choice, it should still be a choice. Relationships only work if both parties are willing and able to meet in the middle." Agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I think it's like other things like that you don't want your partner to do, maybe like drugs or, I don't know, some habits that people have that are discouraged by their partner. I mean, the final decision is always theirs. There's always free will.
Now, Alya in Germany can relate. She says, "I had a similar situation to Bothered in Belgium. My BF, before we got married, wasn't vegan. We argued regularly because he kept bringing cheese home and feeding it to my daughter too. After he watched What the Health twice and The Game Changers twice, both were available on Netflix,
Twice.
praise emoji, he finally transitioned. Now we are a vegan household, and our wedding was vegan too. I totally relate to Bothered in Belgium's experience. It's really hard to be in a relationship with a non-vegan, but don't give up on educating your partner, maybe with the help of such documentaries. Green heart emoji.
Nice.
That's a hopeful message.
Yeah, that's true. Documentaries can help.
Yeah, I think it's not a magic bullet, but if you're already sort of open to it, it can help you think about things.
Yeah.
Matthew Felt Press on Instagram and a vegan for 16 years
Wow,
says...
that's impressive.
Yes, it is, isn't it? If seeing him eat meat really does cause you that much distress, I'd suggest that maybe the two of you try eating meals at separate times or in separate rooms. That's what you said.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
That way, you're not controlling his behavior, but you're also standing up for yourself and your emotional well-being. Well, it is a pragmatic
Sound
solution.
Yes.
It seems like it could be the start of a war, you know? Seems like dissolution, but maybe resolution can come after dissolution. Oh, he goes on. It'll be up to him to decide whether he'd rather eat whatever he wants separately or only things that don't make you uncomfortable, since he can't do both, and pressuring you would be controlling behavior on his part. Also, you may decide you miss eating with him enough that you're willing to endure watching him eat meat after all. I don't think so, Matthew. But yeah, generally, I like his inventive approach, thinking outside the box. Yeah, maybe that is what it takes. Missing each other.
Something needs to be done.
Something has to be done. Yeah, maybe just the act of doing something a bit radical could give them an opportunity to think about things a bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like any disagreement, political or otherwise, I think, no? Sometimes people have different beliefs and they live in the same household.
Yeah. Usually they just ignore each other, but these are two people that intend to...
And they get like confronted at every meal.
There's more.
Oh, goodness.
There's 3 more. Maya Ramsdam on Instagram says, if you make rules for your partner about what they can and can't eat /feed your child, that's without a doubt controlling behavior. The two possibilities I see here are, one, keep talking to find compromises you're both comfortable with and find ways to avoid harsh confrontation with your partner's dietary choices. For example, store meat and dairy in closed, opaque containers. That is a practical solution.
That's practical.
Yeah.
That's true.
Accept your differences and basically deal with it. Option.
Deal with it.
she has an option 2. Work on setting your own boundaries. Your own behavior is the only behavior you can control.
That's true.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds a bit like you talking there. You could have the boundary, I will not be in a cohabitating relationship with someone who is not vegan. But then it is your responsibility to protect your boundaries and step away.
I agree with everything except for the giving your partner limits to what they're feeding the child.
Yeah,
because it could be your child. It could be that your partner is not the parent of the child. So I think definitely you make the rules for your child if you're a parent.
Jessica from Antwerp, whose Instagram handle aptly is the portmanteau Jessica Antwerp, says, "For me, it helped to realize letting go and applying a soft approach actually has the biggest and longest term impact. I will never try and convince anyone of veganism, especially not uninvited. It sets some people off. They get an idea that vegans are militant and it doesn't help you reach, quote, your goal any quicker. On the contrary, even. Having said that, I will not accommodate meat eating. Meaning, if you're in my house and I cook, thou shalt eat no animal produce."
I hope so. I mean, it's your house.
Imagine someone just brings a sausage in their handbag and slaps it on the dinner table.
That would be super rude. I don't think militant is necessarily a bad word, but I understand in the context, like, she means it like pushy.
She means socially gauche. She means
like bringing bacon at the vegan dinner party.
Yeah.
Okay.
As she goes on, since being vegan, and this is a hopeful conclusion, since being vegan, I've dated a few people, and I've been in 2 serious relationships. For some reason, I seem to attract massive meat eaters. The first relationship I had... Are they massive people who eat meat, or do they eat a massive amount of meat?
Wow.
The first relationship I had, I actually transitioned from vegetarian to vegan. I didn't share much about it, but when he was at my place, he ate what I cooked. He then was intrigued by my transition, did the research, and is still vegan to this day, which is about 3 years after the breakup. Current relationship, also big meat eater. Coincidentally, just spent 3 weeks with me, 95% plant-based.
The veganizer.
He lost lots of weight without effort, looks better, first felt worse, and then better. There's no arguing with that kind of experience.
First got worse?
Well, yeah, maybe that was psychosomatic.
Okay.
Who knows? And yeah, I never heard of that. Could be gas. Maybe he never ate vegetables, and then he suddenly had a lot of fiber to contend with.
Goodness. Also, losing weight is not
necessarily
a hallmark of health.
No, not. But it sounds like that was what he was trying to do. So, anyway, she says there's no arguing with that kind of experience. So it must have been positive for him. Okay. Much more effective than having fights about it. Yeah, I generally agree with that approach. And what she said there about not pushing, and then he did the research himself and is now a vegan, that's kind of like what I was implying with the clickbait metaphor. She let him become intrigued. And
let people be, if it's in them to have this realization or experience, then it will happen.
Yeah.
But it won't happen by hammering.
No. Maybe we should add, though, for people who are listening, who are not vegan, who are listening to this question thinking, why are all these people obsessed with making their partners vegan? Can't they just let them be? Well, it's not that. It sounds a bit cultish, I think, from the outside.
Okay, if you're not vegan, maybe.
Yeah, if you're not vegan. But what I think should be said about that is that this is your partner. This is someone who plan to stay with for a long time, if not the rest of your life. And it's important that they understand your values. And if you kind of know that if they're not vegan, clearly they don't understand your values the way you do, otherwise they would be vegan. So there's this kind of tension there.
Yeah, there's tension because it's something fundamental when it comes to ethics. Like, it's something you feel really strongly about, and like, especially if you share a home together, you don't necessarily want to see like pieces of dead animals in your fridge.
No,
I understand that. I mean, the tone was very dramatic, but I understand the sentiment.
Indeed. Now, last and certainly not least, Dr. Nitu Bajekal herself has shared her own experience. She says, "It's really tough when you have a partner who is not vegan and not supportive. It took my husband 15 years eating fish and eggs, ate vegan at home, as that's what I cooked, before he watched Forks Over Knives." So we're talking about two doctors here. Her husband is a doctor as well. She says, "My advice from my own experience would be to avoid proselytizing, as it puts people's backs up. Instead, have conversations on climate change or human health, as it is less threatening."
Yeah, and if you're interested in communication, I will always recommend my favorite communications book or theory is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg.
It's the one with the giraffe and the, what is it, fox?
Yeah. But it does like help you understand how people react to what you're saying, and what's a good way of getting something understood or like sharing information. That's something I would always recommend if you're struggling.
Best of luck. If you have a dilemma for us to discuss, you can submit it using the contact form on tichostable.com/contact. That's all for today. If you've enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch the next episode, when I'll be talking to environmentalist, conservationist and wildlife photographer Rachel Rabibo. Ciao, ciao.
Yeah, no, I thought vegans were the worst, but really I think what was happening was my conscience was saying, get away. Like, I don't want to look at like the things that you're saying, because I don't want to have to accept that and deal with that kind of change.